this time last year, well, before that, obviously Broadcom announced that they were buying VMware, and we all waited with bated breath. Now, Broadcom have a bit of a history, don't they, of companies?
They absolutely do, and to be frank, since they did that initial announcement, in fact, all their customers and service providers were left in the dark over what it actually meant, because Broadcom were making it up as they went along.
Mm-hmm. So that was one of the most painful points for us, that we had to wait. We had no idea what was happening. We knew we had our partner agreement had been terminated. That's all we knew.
Yes.
That we would no longer be a VMware partner, and we would no longer be able to buy VMware licenses, and that's all we were told. At the same time, we've got our own investment cycles. We've got new customers coming on board. So we had tendered through public sector tenders.
That was really challenging, because we were left in a quandary as to what we're going to specify for these customers.
Or even the customers that we'd won. We have a legal obligation to deliver something.
Exactly.
And we had no ability to buy licenses. And as a part of me was wondering if it's a deliberate strategy or not to leave it to the last moment, so you have basically no runway to react.
I think there's an element of it was very badly managed. Even just last week, I think it was, they announced that they were reintroducing certain VMware elements, not for service providers, but for end customers, where you could take enterprise or standard edition of VMware just for the compute elements. Now, if people had made a prior commitment last year and they had to go down VVF or VCF, what does that mean for them? They've changed the goals now. They've rebrought, and don't get me wrong, it's still subscription based and things like that, but they said a year ago that wouldn't happen. They says these are the only products that are now available. So
that, I guess that's a good point for a recap for people who might not be as close to the coalface with us as we are. So there's two elements of this. One is very close to our heart because we're a service provider, but also there's general customers. So they scrapped perpetual licensing for the way that the end customers have been buying VMware since time began. For service providers, they scrapped the VCAP program. So if anyone doesn't know, we used to get charged per gigabyte of VRAM that consumed it, and for a service provider, it was the ideal consumption model, because whatever our customers consumed, we simply got billed for, and we could flex up and we could flex down. So that was scrapped. It still exists, but at a price point that makes it wholly uncompetitive against the rest of the market.
It's completely changed, and it's forced you into that flex up, flex down thing is effectively gone. Well, it's not true. It's not gone. However, the terms and conditions around it, you've now got two models. You've got a commit model, which for a service provider, you need back-to-back commits on everything. You're losing one of the benefits of being a service provider the way we are is the ability to give our customers that flexibility, flex up and flex down. They don't need to commit to things. But what Broadcom have done is they've forced you into you either commit to 3 years up front or you take on demand. But on demand is massively more expensive than commit.
So on demand-ish.
On demand-ish.
Yeah. Then we've basically lost the ability to speak to VMware. So we were an early adopter of VeloCloud, their SD-WAN solution, which is a good product. It worked very well. However, with products like that, they seem to have forgotten that they bought that as well at the same time. So we have had issues where we had to try and prove that we'd bought something. So we'd bought customer licenses years in advance, and we need to go back and prove that we've actually bought them.
I actually had to end up getting involved. So our support teams actually escalated to myself to investigate this, and I went through the loop. So we had paid 5 years prepaid in advance up front through one of the distributors. The service teams have been dealing with the distributor. They were getting nowhere. I ended up needing to email both the distributor and one of the senior people at Broadcom, and it took about 4 or 5 weeks to get a sensible answer for them, to the point where I was saying, we've paid this 5 years up front. This is ridiculous. This is getting to the point where we're going to have to create some kind of action on it, because we've effectively, so we effectively had 3 months of zero support that we'd paid for 5 years. So I did actually question them on that to say, well, we've paid you for that 3 months, so what happens there? We had no support. We actually had open customer tickets that we weren't able to get escalated support for that we paid for.
Yeah. And I guess nobody cares is the ultimate. So
nobody cares. And I've heard from some of your customers, some of your bigger customers directly as well, especially on the back of Broadcom releasing the information about enterprise and standard being available again, that they've tried to contact Broadcom and say, well, what does it actually mean? What does that mean for us? And there's been a month has elapsed and they've not heard a response to them at all. So again, are they making that up as well?
So I guess the new model is Broadcom have meant to rely on their channel partners. So they've got a smaller number of large, basically distributors that they've put together. And I guess we go via Red-centric.
We do,
don't we? And to be fair to Red-centric, when they get the information, they do help us out as much as they can. And
they do, and even on the VeloCloud, and this is where you see that, they actually came back to us and says, listen, you guys don't buy VeloCloud support through us. We've actually raised tickets on your behalf, but we shouldn't have. And obviously doing the right thing. I said, well, I wouldn't expect you to be raising tickets. We need Broadcom to help us. And that was why we had to then go back through the original channel partner, who were then escalating it to Broadcom, and it went on for weeks. And as I say, it eventually got escalated to myself, who had to send an email. And after that email went, we did eventually get somewhere, but it bounced around in between the channel partner and senior teams in Broadcom. And I think there was an element that it eventually got to a person that knew what had to happen, and they instructed us, and we set it up.
Going from there. So we've been banging on about this for some time, and people might be saying, "Oh, give it a break." I mean, we know you're not happy about it.
I don't think they will be, though, because I think if people are feeling half the pain that we felt through this process, it will be impacting their business. And they will be worried about the future of that impacting their business again, because the thing that concerns me most, and we'll probably come on to talk about this later, but the thing that concerns me most is what's next. If they're willing to just rip up the rule book and throw everything out overnight practically, then I'll worry about, from a business continuity perspective. People look at business continuity in different ways, but a supplier making a massive change to things is a business continuity issue as well, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's a couple of different points to that. So we're seeing one of two of our big customers who have been discussing with us about late fees. They've brought in, so they weren't aware of this. Again, the defence will be, well, if you read your partner agreement, you'll know about them. But if you don't commit to licensing, even when you're under support, you're now getting late fees coming out. And I guess when companies, if they're not performing well, how do they behave? What do they do? Are they going to be ethical about how they treat their customers? But I think there's a few reasons I'm being so vocal about this. One, if we accept it from one of the major technology suppliers, others are watching. And
they're going to push the boundaries of what they think they can get away with. Yeah, definitely, that's human nature.
And there is a concept of go hard, then give it time to heal, and people move on. We see it when we're dealing with customers. So Data Vita as well, we have data centers. We regularly get customers who got in contact with us either because their own data centers went off or another supplier's data center went off. If you don't get them in the point where they're angry, they don't move. I mean, it's amazing where after a little while people will say, "Oh, they said it's not going to happen again."
Say time's a good healer, isn't it?
It's going to be very awkward for me. So I fear that we might be in that kind of psychological process of anger, then acceptance, going forward as well. So one of the other elements why I'm banging on about this is VMware is a unique product in our industry. I feel there is not another product. Maybe Cisco is one, where it's fundamental at the heart of almost every enterprise, every SME, every service provider, every small customer. Most have an investment or a line on VMware.
I think because they've got such a big market share, that's definitely accurate. I think from a pure technology standpoint, I think I said this the last time we spoke about it, from a pure hypervisor point of view, there are alternatives, but it's not just in things like feature parity. That's getting better in places, and depending on what you go for, be it Hyper-V, Proxmox, KVM, one of these things, they do have feature parity. Where it really struggles and where it really breaks down is the ecosystem, and it's that VMware. Obviously, the investment VMware made because it was one of the main players. It was integrated. It integrates with everything seamlessly. And that's the biggest challenge in terms of that, is how you still, it's not how you have a hypervisor really, you can run it you could run a hypervisor on anything. You might lose certain features depending if you're using some really, some really deep down features of VMware that you might get the benefit from. But a lot of people, a vast portion of people, just need a hypervisor to run their workloads. But it's that ecosystem. And what I mean by that is your backup, your disaster recovery. If you're a service provider, one of the things for us, one of the challenges is around self-service type portal. So VMware obviously heavily integrated with vCloud Director. Some of these other portals, they're just not quite there. So you're into things like custom development and
the interoperability of VMware's is its single biggest selling point in Broadcom. I'm open to visibility about what we had to do. When we looked at it, you think, okay, we'll have an alternative to VMware. Then right, your backup product doesn't work, so we've invested millions of pounds in our backup technology. So you went, okay, that doesn't work. So well, I put that in the bin, or we find something else. Then you go, okay, this one works with a backup, but all of the storage products that we've bought over the years don't quite work the way that you've got them configured. So yeah, you've got a mass migration, or you're buying new storage products.
So that particular one, in the early days, we started looking at things like Nutanix, for example, and it was the storage element. We were going to have to throw away all that storage investment we had, because Nutanix wanted to work on its own hyperconverged infrastructure that was on its compatibility list.
And here's a I guess a slight controversial point as well. Obviously we looked at Nutanix. There was a lot of noise coming from Nutanix during this about they're going to be the saviours. We don't treat our customers like this, and I'm not saying that they act in the same way, but the ecosystem is exactly the same. Nutanix is perfect as long as you use everything that is Nutanix.
Yeah.
So we kind of felt a little bit like you were out the fire pan into the fire with that one. It appears to be great technology as long as you're end-to-end Nutanix, and now that might be good for some greenfield deployments. It might be good for some standalone projects, but big complex service providers that have years and years of technology debt that we need to get money out of now. We can't simply go back and say that couple of £1 million worth of storage we bought. Well,
and it's all your eggs in one basket again as well. So what's to stop? Let's say Broadcom. I'm never saying this is going to happen, but Broadcom decide, Nutanix would be a good buy, wouldn't they? Mm-hmm. Let's do the same again. But at that point, you are really, really, if you're in an early part of a cycle of having deployed Nutanix, you're potentially going to be left with a bigger bill.
So
over time.
One of the issues that we came across, just talking about some of the problems and how it's impacting customers, and this is almost like a therapy session, I think, more than anything else, just for you and I.
Yeah, we like this, don't we?
But there'll be some customers out there who are actually struggling with this now, because you made a good point the other week when we were talking about it, that a lot of people had to react at the time. Then that once you renew, the problem is immediately, it's not the highest priority anymore. There's another fire burning somewhere, and it goes to the back of the list. And we're seeing a range of customers coming up to renewals again. Or the anniversaries of what's happening on new systems coming out, and they're thinking, oh Christ, okay, we need to deal with this. So we have a lot of public sector customers. One of the big aspects that we see in public sector customers, they've got lots of technology debt because of they need to sweat investment more than enterprise organizations. They're more budget constrained, so they need to make their technology last longer. So typically, some of our public sector customers are running older hardware. Mm-hmm. With older hardware, you get lower core counts. Now, that was one of the aspects that we didn't touch on. With there's a minimum of 16 cores licensed now. So if you've got lots of servers that only have 4 cores or 6 cores, the increase those customers saw were exponential.
Yeah, because you're paying a premium because you're paying that minimum 16 cores, whether it's, if it's less than 16, you're still paying 16 at a minimum. So you are feeling a bit of pain for that. And we have actually seen a bit of pain on that in terms of that overage on it, which does then make it very difficult because, again, you've got a customer who's wanting to sweat that asset. You don't want to renew it outside a refresh cycle, but you're in a catch-22 because if you don't look at potentially renewing it, then you're going to be swallowing a cost for, and we have had to absorb costs for certain customers as well. We've tried to be clever and do certain things. The other thing is as well, in the per gig of VRAM model, previously you were able to have, if you had a DR environment that was dark, it was like SRM target or Zerto type target, you didn't need to license it. But you now need to, Zerto uses the concept of a VRA. So every box that you're replicating to has got a VRA running. As soon as that VRA is running, you've activated the core count on that box, and it's the full core count. So you're potentially going from needing to pay for a couple of gig of VRAM to paying for
hundreds of cores.
So your
has a feel of Oracle about it, doesn't it?
Your price increase is exponential at that point. You know, without over dramatizing it definitely has had a big impact, and we've seen certain circumstances with customers, and we find that even now, customers that still look for VMware, when you're doing a DR design, you do need to factor in, well, wait a minute, the core count here, how can I minimise the core count in terms of keeping things dark, and you maybe make an alleviation, you're buying, you've got N+1 hardware, you still need to have that N+1, but can we do it in such a way that we don't need to license all the hosts and have one in maintenance mode? And we start to do, and once you start getting into that territory, there's something fundamental flawed for me. If I license, the cost of that's driving you into that, it's the wrong solution.
No, absolutely. And the worst impacted out of the law has been customers who are running older hardware and working in education or the charity space, as they used to receive quite a hefty discount, and that discount is now gone. So not only are they exponentially going up from the amount of cores that they need to cover, but they also now have lost their discount.
Yeah. And I think, you know, there's been a lot of Broadcom have banked on a lot of these things where they know that people can't move quick because it's so fundamentally a lot of customers' technology stacks. They know people can't move quickly. So that last minute, you know, here's what it is, here's what it looks like. You said earlier, is that maybe a bit deliberate? You know, it did force people into a path, but as you say, we're nearly up for that year, so you deal with it at the time, and yes, it was a painful pill to take, but you took it, and then, well, we forget about it now, but now it's coming back up. You know, you're constantly going to, you're never going about that cycle. It's a problem every year, right? We need to do it. Oh, well. And again, it's how do you, in your business, how do you go back? How do you go back with an unquantifiable cost to your business and say, well, this has been up 300%?
Yeah.
A business owner's going to, you know, question any IT department on that. Well, why are we doing that then?
I know. So that's all the negatives. That's the moan. That's the therapy session. But with change, there's opportunity. There's always opportunity to do things. So we've been through a rather laborious process, but I guess what it's meant is we've actually developed quite a unique system that allows us to quickly identify what the best route is. And what we're not saying is VMware should be stripped out and removed out of your environment at any cost, because that's cutting your nose off to spite your face. Yeah. That's putting bad money after bad. But there was a lot of marketing went into concepts like cloud first. So where the concept is basically you go all in an ecosystem. It might be the public cloud, it might be VMware, it might be Nutanix, but you go in our ecosystem end to end, and that's the best way to do it. Where in fact, what we are doing, how we are helping customers, is we're dealing on a workload by workload basis, because two types of workloads within the same organization can look entirely different in terms of what the requirements are. And we've come up with really three simple questions that do go a bit more into detail. But the first one is you've got to understand the requirements of that workload. Is it new? Is it legacy? Is it something that's going to be about for loads of time? Does it have some sort of weird licensing model? So you need to understand the kind of fundamental, the old style IT due diligence that you would do with anything. Then what's the security and compliance wrap around that? That drives a lot. Does it coexist? Once you understand that, then the last thing is, who do you want to operate it? Does the customer want to operate it? Do they want to be a shared responsibility, or do they not want to do anything with it at all? And normally when you ask those questions in slightly more detail, the answer is glaringly obvious. It doesn't need to be complicated to understand why a workload should be running somewhere.
No, absolutely. And I think, as you rightly say, a workload in one organisation could be treated completely different from another organisation, depending on certain internal constraints. Like there might be compliance reasons why that they have to go down the VMware route, and that might make a decision for you. But there's also keeping customers' eyes open to there are alternative ways to deliver this, and it can still be protected and delivered in the same way. Understanding constraints in that workload, as you say, around specific things about high availability, things like resource scheduling, where VMs sit, and all these kind of things as well. Different hypervisors get different feature parity, so understanding a bit more about the detail behind that or what it really needs. And it's getting away from this old school IT problem where what technical people would always say is, oh, it must have that. But you actually scratch the surface of that and say, well, does it really need that for every single virtual machine? And you can get into a situation, to me, where I see this going personally is a kind of hybridization of where workloads land. And hybrid obviously is a very, very popular buzzword. What I mean by hybrid? So we are actually looking at a number of things, and based on what your workload is, there might be certain workloads that public cloud's ideal for, and that's what we would recommend. There might be workloads where VMware is the right answer. We've also got a secondary hypervisor platform that we've got now, that we've stood up, and the whole reason for that is to give a different price profile, and it is kind of feature comparative, but what we've focused on around that is the ecosystem. So we've actually managed to get a common ecosystem across VMware and our secondary hypervisor, where the backup tool's the same, the DR tool's the same, the storage platform's the same. So all of these things all work hand in hand. And one of the beautiful parts of that is that the DR tooling can actually do cross-hypervisor migration and replication between the two platforms. So that starts to open up a bit of a door to thinking about, well, do you know what? I need production in DR. I still want my production to be VMware, but my DR could be something different, as long as it's seamless. And we've now got a roadmap towards that, where we could bring a customer in. They need let's just say, for example, they need VMware for their internal compliance governance reasons. Okay, that's fine. So we can migrate you like for like. We can then take on, in terms of that VMware part, we can do the heavy lifting for you. Why would you do that? Why would we do that rather than stick where we are? We just deal with VMware direct. Well, we can do the heavy lifting on the VMware part and take that pain away for you and make that easy for you. Bring you in, nice easy migration path to get to that, but also give you that DR on a secondary hypervisor, which actually the power in that is your business continuity. Let's say that Broadcom rip up the rulebook again and it's another 1,000% increase for everybody. You could enact a DR failover onto the secondary hypervisor, run your workloads in that in production and roll onto a new secondary hypervisor of the same type and remove your VMware costs. And you could do blends of that. So you could have some on VMware, you could some on the secondary hypervisor and various guises, and do some clever stuff with networking in between. So it's all on the same subnets and things. So it's seamless to you, and you never actually knew. So you start to get, so what's the so what of that? The so what of that for me is, it's all about giving the customer flexibility and choice, and actually making their life, do you know what, you've got an option here. And I'm not saying that the two options are, they're not the only options in town, but we feel that because that's integrated with this ecosystem, it's thought about the bigger picture, rather than saying something like, well, do you know what, we'll run you on Proxmox, and then go, oh, actually, sorry about that, your backup's terrible now because we forgot about immutability. That's why we've made the decisions we've made to go where we're going, because we know that all that backup tool and all the stuff that worked well with VMware still works with the new hypervisor we've got alongside it. And we've got that interoperability, which is so important and so key, and gives customers a flexibility.
So, putting you in the spot and keeping the answers brief, because you like a lot of words.
Apologies.
Pros and cons of each of the hypervisors we looked at. So VMware, we love the technology, but we don't trust Broadcom. Yep.
It is definitely the best hyper. I said this before.
Yeah.
It is the best hypervisor for a whole number of reasons. My personal view, and people might argue about that, for a whole range of reasons, but just its level of maturity, the features that it's got, that kind of thing. It's definitely the best.
Nutanix
looks, in terms of, obviously Nutanix, you've got the option to run VMware on that, or you can run the Acropolis stuff. Nutanix, again, very good, but my concern on that is that you are tied into an ecosystem there, and that would be my biggest concern on that. You're all that, you that flexibility,
and you need to put all your storage in the bin.
Yeah, and you've that ecosystem bit again. Don't get me wrong, I think that in terms of the things like backup tooling, so I think you could use, we use Cohesity, as you know, and I think Cohesity does support Nutanix now. But again, storage is obviously a big one. A lot of people have got a lot of investment in storage and the like.
KVM derivatives, so you've got Proxmox, you've got all the other open source.
KVM stuff, great for Linux workloads. You start to put Windows workloads and stuff on it, and you start to get into a position where you think, do you know what, the value here of this is less, because you could do the same on Hyper-V, and you're already absorbing, obviously you need to buy the data center version licenses for that to do it properly, but you're eroding the cost model at that point. I think the other thing with the likes of KVM and stuff, still immature in terms of that ecosystem, and I mean that from a backup and DR perspective. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying for 1 minute there's not backup tools and DR tools and stuff out there.
They're not enterprise ready, but are they?
Zerto, Cohesity, things like
Rubrik,
that. Rubrik, all these guys, they're not quite there yet. I'm not saying for a minute again.
Because Veeam announced support.
Veeam have announced. Rubrik have as well, I believe, but I don't know how mature it is. But I think over time, I think it will eventually get there, and I think that will then... Proxmox, I absolutely loved, in terms it can do Linux containers and stuff like that, just out the box. I think one of the things with Proxmox that I wasn't sure about was how enterprise grade it was. It's Proxmox is the kind of thing you see a lot of people online. I'm using it and building my home lab in Proxmox, and it's brilliant. Whilst I'm not saying for 1 minute it wouldn't do a job, I would want to test that a bit more in terms of giving it a proper stress test, and we did a bit of testing on it and it did seem to stand up. But again, that scalability part for me with Proxmox would be a concern. KVM and the like, OpenStack, all these kind of things, I think you're into a management challenge in terms of skill sets for getting people to look after it, and it can get quite complicated quickly. Don't get me wrong, we've got it up and running, great, but I think getting to that point and then managing it.
So we've always had that choice to make about do you commit the development time to get the product working the way you need it, especially around OpenStack, world's your oyster.
Yes.
If you're willing to invest the time, the knowledge and the skill sets. For our business and for our type of customers, we didn't think that was right. We are not going to put in the development time that we need. And it was all, and maybe we were wrong, Brian, but when we're looking back, we think, well, why would we spend so much time developing our own solution when VMware do it for us? And it turns out, but in reality, would we have ever got close to the usability within our team with the level of investment? Probably not.
I think it would have been difficult for us, to be honest. And again, you're absolutely right. If you have got the team with the skills and the time, the investment and time you're willing to make in it, I think you could get there, and you get to. And I'm quite sure there's organisations that are using that and doing it pretty well. But just for us, it wasn't the right thing. It wasn't the right thing to do because of our other technology investment choices as well. Again, there was things there with that.
And it's not just about the ones-off development. It's about how do you innovate.
Yeah.
And you need people to spend time saying, okay, what products, what features have coming out of this? How can we use it? How does that work within all the custom codes and layers of arbitration we've put in with our own system? So for us, that's not how our technology business is structured. So our preference is to use enterprise technology and amalgamate it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that is the direction of travel that we've taken, and that's the one that we're still on. Really.
That's a hill we'll die on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So,
and last but not least, Hyper-V.
Yep. So Hyper-V, certainly from a feature comparison point of view, is getting there. It's definitely improved from where it once was. Compatibility wise, it's got the compatibility with things like Cohesity, with Zerto. Zerto actually had depreciated Hyper-V on a version, but after VMware made their announcement, interestingly, they're bringing it back out, so they will still support you on the original version of Zerto that supported Hyper-V. Then the latest version it's not supported, and they changed all the VRAs and stuff out of Linux-based stuff. So what their development teams are currently trying to do is make that work with Hyper-V again. So the roadmap for those guys is that Hyper-V will be supported in the coming versions. So there is a path there.
I guess the other risk is with Microsoft as well. So Microsoft do like a license model tweak from time to time as well.
Yep.
At the moment, for a lot of our customers, Hyper-V is a great choice because they have a lot of Windows. They have a big Windows estate, so the data center licensing works really well for them. If you then use Hyper-V, then the integration into Azure, it works well.
Yep.
But I guess we're one license change away from that being a disaster.
Yeah, if Microsoft decide to
Yeah.
do something completely different or force you down a route, I guess with any large technology vendor, that is a risk, and that's the benefit analysis that you need to do between that and the kind of open source route.
And another thing, there's always been a rumor or a myth that Hyper-V is end of life. And there is rumors out there that it's end of life, but officially from Microsoft, it's
not.
No.
As a role, it's not end of life.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest challenges that we found with Hyper-V and that ecosystem bit is the portal, customer self-service type portal. There is no direct vCloud director equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
With Hyper-V, you've got SCVMM, but it's not really all that conductive to creating a similar portal type experience that you can do with vCloud Director out the box.
Mm-hmm.
There are other things you can do clearly to get around that and make it usable, but it's, you need an additional piece of technology to help you do that.
So the answer to all this is it depends.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So it depends. So if any organization is claiming that they have the answer for you and it's 100% of something, I would say that they're trying to sell you something. Then fit you into a t-shirt size. Everyone is becoming more comfortable with getting crammed into a t-shirt size that either is too small or too big for them going forward. So the horrible, and it is a horrible marketing term of hybrid, actually does seem to be the proper terminology and where people are ending up.
It absolutely is. And I think when I spoke previously, flexibility is the key. It's about enabling the flexibility for the customer. And I like the detail.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, in the circumstance that we're in now with this kind of thing, the devil is in the detail, because it's what you were talking about our workload analysis methodology. It is about taking workloads and looking at them on case-by-case basis and getting in. Don't get me wrong, I don't mean spending 1,000 years on it, but a sensible look at your workloads and finding the best placement for them and making sure that your design has got that flexibility around it in terms of what you can do.
That's a good point. So what do you think the main blockers are to someone being actually able to move forward with a hybrid environment? If you think about all the IT departments you've worked in, what's the main thing stopping? Is it attitude? Is it?
I think attitude's part of it. I think organisational red tape as well, because you get organisations that will make blanket statements like it has to be VMware.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's maybe challenging
that.
AWS
or that sort of
I think it's challenging that, and don't get me wrong, it's difficult. I've worked in some big organisations, and especially in the bigger organisations, it can be very, very difficult because it comes down for the technology top, if you like. And this is the mandate you must use.
You can't even see the top of the tower.
Yeah,
it's that high. Uh-huh.
And I get that. I get why they do that, because they need a degree of standardisation. And obviously different scales and different size of business. Again, this is back to the workload wheel. Mm-hmm. That size and scale will have an impact on what it is you're willing to do or where you're willing to go. And you might just say, do you know what? We don't care. We're just going to go VMware. That's what we're going to have to swallow it. It's a cost to the business. We'll take it. But you'll get people in that kind of middle area as well, where they'll be going, well, we can't afford to do that. The business can't afford to do it. Mm-hmm. And I guess it depends on your organisational circumstance as well. But what I would say is you need to challenge why does it have to be that? For what reason? Have we actually done the analysis? Mm-hmm. Look at what happened with public cloud. Everybody went that cloud first. Everything has to go cloud first. Nobody really thought about the depths of that detail. What does that mean? There's stuff that won't fit in there. Nobody thought about it. Just thought, that's great. We can go and dump everything in there. That's somebody else's problem to deal with. Notionally, it looks cheaper. But then when you start looking at the detail, actually it's only cheaper in certain cases. Mm-hmm. And don't get me wrong, it is cheaper in certain circumstances.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Cheaper's it's a one-dimensional way to look at it. But I hat off to them. I think the cloud first marketing campaign that was put upon us was genius, absolutely genius. Yep. Where you had every CTO, every Gartner representative spewing the same old crap that cloud first, and it made you sound quite intelligent and you were ahead of the game, and if somebody asked you what your strategy was, you just kind of leaned in and went cloud first.
Yeah, and it's an age-old problem, the IT industry, isn't it? It's that Gartner and people like that, they come out with something. If you're not seen to be doing that, or you must be doing the wrong thing. I don't think that's true.
And making decisions, and within I wouldn't name any names, but even within the public sector, and the public sector within Scotland, there's actually employees of the government that are there to ensure that a cloud strategy comes first. Now, I would love employees within the government to say there's a data vita first model, or there's a hybrid cloud model first with that. But that's just the power of these massive technology companies. They've convinced everyone to give up what we used to do in IT. We used to have certain standards that we would go to when we're planning a new project, and exit was always one of them. What happens at the end of life of this? How do we get off it? Now, what we've been convinced is, don't worry about that. You don't need to worry about that, because you never need to exit. And it's like Hotel California. Now, you can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave.
Such a lovely place.
Exactly. And we are finding a lot of customers are stuck in that loop. Is they're in, they're out, they're half addicted but want to get out and find themselves in that scenario.
How many customers have you spoke to in your time that have started on a cloud first journey, and it was meant to be 18 months, 24 months to get there, and they're 5 or 6 years down the line, they've got systems that are crumbling because they were already pushing the boundaries of longevity on them. The cloud first approach hasn't worked, and now they're left in a horrible place. They're not quite in or out. They've got an aging technology platform that they can't support anymore. They've got no budget for sustainment, because that was the one big thing I never understood. And there was an organisation I worked for very, very briefly in my career, and I won't name their name, but when I went in there, they were all bought into everything was cloud first. It has to be cloud first. And in one of the very early meetings I went to them, they had a platform. It was a learning portal, for a worldwide learning portal. And it was running on old Oracle technology and various bits and pieces, old Linux and stuff like that. And one of my first questions was, what are you doing in terms of sustainment? And everybody looked at me and went, what do you mean? And I says, well, you've got this cloud first strategy and you're trying to get there, and you've got this 24-month plan. But I've only been in the door 2 weeks, and I can already see that 24-month plan looks ambitious. What are you going to do if 24 months goes by and you're nowhere near being on that? And everybody just looked around to each other and went, we don't know. And after that, it was a project spawned to look at a sustainment budget and actually look at, well, what do we do and how do that? And I reckon that, I'm not saying that's the case today, it might still be, but there's been a lot of customers, a lot of people, organisations that have been caught in that trap.
Yeah, no, 100%. So to finish up, again, put you in the spot, what 3 bits of short advice would you give?
Short, man. I hate the way you always say to me short.
Short advice. I need to get home for my dinner at some point. What 3 pieces of short advice would you give to customers who are feeling any of the pain points that we've spoke about today?
Understand your workloads, first and foremost. So speak to, obviously prefer you speak to us, but you don't have to. We're not the only people you speak to. Speak to relevant people about your workloads, about understanding what options you actually have. Don't get bogged down by red tape in your organisation of saying it must be, not without understanding that workload. And don't just follow what is deemed as traditional norms, i.e. Gartner says or so-and-so says,
I think for yourself. Yeah.
It's maybe a bad example, but just the other day I was on LinkedIn and I seen that VMware had posted an article about Broadcom saying, most trusted, won an award for most trusted provider. And it's that kind of social media, I'm not going to say pressure, but you know what I mean?
We're dealing with organisations that have billions of pounds worth of marketing, and they're using it.
So don't believe everything that you see or hear online. So you'll make decisions for yourself. I don't care what MD says, you as an organisation, as a customer, as an IT department, whatever you might be, your workload's best. Don't get me wrong, providers like ourselves and others can ask you the right questions to understand where the best placement is and help you with that journey. But but don't just blindly listen or follow what marketing is telling you. I think that would be my top tips for.
Awesome. Well, two men moaning in the cloud. So.
Yeah, again, thank you.
All right, cheers.